Welcome to the Art of Badassery, where I explore what it takes to live life on your own terms, break free from the status quo, and unleash your inner badass. Whether you're a rebel at heart or simply seeking inspiration to step outside your comfort zone, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Mahara Wayman, and each week I dive into the stories, insights, and strategies of those who have mastered the art of badassery and are living life to the fullest. They smile when no one is looking. Before we get started, a quick note from our sponsor, Mindfulness with Mahara. What if the struggles you go through as a female entrepreneur are actually what make your dream business strong? What if doing the inner work is what finally moves the needle in your business? Ladies, are you tired of feeling stuck, drained, and uncertain on your journey to business success? Let's shake things up and dive into the real game changer, the inner work. As your fellow entrepreneur who's been through it all, I'm thrilled to announce the launch of my new group program, Build Your Best Badass Business, kicking off on May 1st. Listen up, this isn't your average group program. We're going all in because I know firsthand that to build a thriving business, you've got to conquer those internal battles first. No more brushing aside the inner work or ignoring that niggle of unease in your belly. You've already put in the grind for your business. Now it's time to prioritize your own growth and empowerment. So join me as we explore the transformative power of clarity, mindfulness, courage, assertiveness, and setting kick-ass goals. Together, we'll shape your journey into the ultimate success story. So are you ready to unleash your inner badass? DM me to learn more and book your free badass breakthrough session. Let's see if we're fit to work together and if my program is exactly what you've been looking for. I'm Mahara, your badass coach. Welcome to the Art of Badassery, the show where I am blessed to chat with badass women from around the world. My name is Mahara Wayman, and today we've got none other than Bron Williams joining us. Bron, tell us all about you.
Thank you, Mahara. It's so great to be here. I'm in my third act of life. So in my first act, I did the traditional things. I got married, had children, and I trained to be a teacher. That was something I wanted to do from the age of 8. Second act of life started when I turned 50, and I walked away from my marriage. I'd given it 28 years and the last 15 of them had been rather difficult. And so I just couldn't do that relationship any longer. So I stepped out and shifted gears and joined the Salvation Army as a Salvation Army officer, became an ordained minister of religion, which was really interesting. And I loved being involved with people. And during that time, I worked on a little Pacific island called Nauru with asylum seekers, because the Australian government had an agreement with the Nauruan government to process asylum seekers who came to Australia by boat there. So that was a pivotal moment for me. Now, when I turned 60, as you do, I decided, okay, it's third act, I'll start a business. And so at the age of 60, I stepped into building a professional speaking business. And that's what I've been doing for the last nearly 8 years. And hopefully this will be my last act. I think I found the right place for me to finish out my working life.
Oh my goodness, what a story. And I'm curious if when you decided to change acts, as you said, you had act 1, act 2, and act 3, what was going through your mind that allowed you to go, yeah, no, I got to do this?
Yeah, okay. Because each change of act was different. With the first one, having been raised in a conservative Christian tradition, divorce was not something that was on my radar at all. In fact, the only advice we were given when we got married was don't get divorced. And I took that to heart. And as I said, married for 28 years. So, a good solid length of time. However, I was really unhappy for, the second half of the marriage, and I tried really hard. I sort of insisted that we go to counselling. And in the end, I left because without really knowing why I was leaving, but just knowing I couldn't stay any longer. But prior to that, for about 4 years, I'd been looking at verses in the Bible. I'd been reading things all about divorce, because this, for me, was almost like the unforgivable sin. It was such a huge step. I didn't know. Nobody in my church had been divorced. Nobody in my family was divorced. So I didn't have anybody, in a sense, who'd gone ahead of me into this space. So it was just, like, you could call it a leap of faith, but it wasn't that. It was just, I just have to go and then figure out, what to do next. And of course I did that. And I've actually discovered that what I'd recognized as passive aggressive behavior with my first husband, that type of behavior is still abusive, because passive aggressive is still aggressive. It just presents in a different way, like no shouting, no hitting, no throwing of anything, but in many ways the effects are the same, sometimes worse, because you don't see the wounds. So that was the transition there. The second, again, doesn't come, like, no major life changes are ever done on a whim or in a snap. For a long time, I'd wanted to be a professional speaker, because I knew I had that ability and I wanted to impact the world. And it just seemed that at 60, I could access my superannuation. And so I knew that I actually had some finances behind me to step out and do something new. So it was actually, turning 60 was quite a significant point, because I could then draw down my super. I had some money. Let's go and see what I can make of this next stage.
Would you say, though, that the decision to leave your marriage versus the decision to join the Salvation Army versus the decision to become a speaker, that the degree of desire was different in each of them?
Oh, very much so. Because leaving my marriage wasn't so much about, like, I didn't have, like, I wasn't moving straight into a new relationship. It was 11 years before I really dated again, or no, 8 years before I dated again. So it wasn't like I was sort of, I already had somebody else lined up. It was like, that was probably the most courageous thing I've ever done in my life. It was huge. So the motivation, it wasn't even about trying to build a new life or something better. I just, when you just think, I can't stand this. I literally cannot take this anymore, even though I hadn't yet at that stage recognised what the impact of the relationship was having on me. I just knew, I can't do this anymore. I've tried so hard. I can't do this anymore. So that was the motivation. The motivation to join the Salvation Army was, because having a strong Christian background and being a woman who is a leader, the ability to be a minister in a sort of a subculture where women are generally not leaders, for me was really attractive. And, it enabled me to get a degree as well. So I got, was able to get the training. Then the step out of the Salvation Army and into professional speaking is probably the easiest, and the simplest and the most straightforward. That does not mean that the journey for the last 8 years has been anything but convoluted and circles and up and down and all over the place. But the decision to do it was easy, because this was about me following my heart.
I think what's a big call out here is there's two reasons why we make a change. And one is that we're running from something. We've got to get away from something. And the other, as you know, and you've said quite eloquently, is I was moving towards something. And
yes,
both cases require courage. But without a doubt, when you don't know what you're going to, you just know you got to leave. That's especially courageous and very, very powerful. Tell us a little bit more about how life was for you once you made that decision. Like, how did it go?
Okay.
Your husband.
Yeah, look, I love that question. I had this image. I used to describe myself in those first couple of years after leaving the marriage as like a little frog on a rock in a pond. And I was on this rock, and all I needed to know was what's the next rock to get across the pond. And that was really because I was in such uncharted territory. As I said, I did not have anybody in my circle, family or friends, who had been divorced, who'd actually navigated this, at least recently. So there really wasn't anybody to sort of say, Bron, this is the thing that you need to do, or even give me any advice. So I was really very dependent. For me, it was on guidance, God opening up something, as the next rock in the pond. And that's very much how I felt it. Of course, there were impacts on family. My sons were in their teens and older. And don't let anybody ever tell you that divorce doesn't affect your older children. It certainly does. And sometimes I think it's harder because they've had a lifetime of knowing you in one role, and then all of a sudden you step away from that role, and and depending on the person, they find it more or less easy to come to terms with, and that brings a whole lot of other dynamics. Yeah, but look, I think actually when I look back to particularly those first couple of years, having to find a little place on my own, support myself, I had no money, like so many women of my generation. I'd stopped full-time work before my children were born. I'd only done part-time teaching to supplement my husband's income. The only thing that I had of my own was a credit card with, I think, a maximum of $5,000 on it. But interestingly, when I was able to get that credit card before I left the marriage, I knew that was significant, because I knew if I have to go, I've actually got access to some money, because I didn't have any in the bank. So, so it was, very tenuous. Starting again from scratch when you're 50 is hard. But you do it because in a sense, you either go back or you go forward.
Well, I think that's the thing that's so powerful about this journey of being human, right? I say it all the time. We're spiritual beings having a human existence. And when we give ourselves permission to grow, sometimes it really hurts, right? And we know that we can't stay still. And there's that balance of, okay, what's next? Am I willing to jump in and do that? But I'm curious to go from divorced Christian. What was it about the Salvation Army that attracted you so? And had you, this is next. Yeah. Hitch my wagon to this.
Yeah, look, that's a good question. I was living in regional New South Wales, so not in a big city. And, when you separate and you're part of a church, it became awkward to keep rocking up to church as two separated people, when you'd always attended together. So I left the church where I had been, and the other in the area were not ones that I felt I would feel at home with. And I knew some people at the Salvation Army, and I thought, okay, and I went on that first day and I sat in the back row just hoping to sit quietly and go unobserved, but they welcomed me with open arms. And so that really was why it was like I knew some people, I went there, and then I was made welcome. So that was really, it was about finding a new community. And then there was a process after that of training with them as an officer.
So what's the biggest thing you learned about yourself with your time with the Salvation Army?
Oh, goodness. Oh, no one has ever asked me that question. Wow, the biggest thing I've learned about myself is I am more powerful than I ever thought.
Hence, I'm doing a high five for those of you that aren't watching the video of this. That's an amazing thing to recognize. Do you have a specific incident that you can share with us when that became crystal clear to you?
Yeah. Actually, I don't think it's really become clear until the last couple of years. So, like, I left the marriage in 2006. So, it's 18 years ago. And like most of these things, it's more a process than a big bang. I've had to unlearn the messaging from my childhood and growing up years, to be the good daughter, good wife, good mother, good Christian woman, and to, sit down, be quiet and play small. Knowing all the time that I'm a woman of decided opinions, that I'm intelligent, articulate, and I make decisions quickly, and I know what I want, and yet I felt that it wasn't, in a sense, wasn't right for me to be the way I am naturally, but I didn't push back against it because my faith culture was important to me. That was my family, my community. I trusted what they said. And so I think I just operated from the fact of, well, I have to change these things in me that don't fit the pattern that I have been said, a woman should be shaped into. And it's, I suppose in terms of incidents, I was at a lunch in Sydney, probably, gosh, the years run into each other. So it was pre-COVID. So let's say 5 years ago. And a random man who was a friend of the woman who'd organised it said to me, "Who are you giving your power away to?" And immediately I said, "Men." And then I said, "No, my sons." So I recognised in that moment that I had been giving my power away to men, and then particularly my sons, because I believe I'd actually been taught that that was what a woman should do. You should be submissive. A husband needs to be the head of the household. So that, I think, was the catalyst moment for me to recognise, A, that I had power, and B, I was responsible if I was giving it away. And so it's probably been these last 5 years where I have started to really step into my own power and not apologise for the fact that I'm intelligent, articulate, and have decided opinions, and then to encourage other women who are like me, because there's lots of us out there, to do the same. Not necessarily leave your marriages, but, step into your power.
I really, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. And I think it's worth calling out that often we have our biggest lessons from things that we weren't even aware of. So the minute you acknowledge that you had given your power away, it also means that you had something to give away.
Yes.
Right. And that is really powerful, not to use that word too much in this conversation, but what a great call out. So listeners, if you've ever felt that you have given your power away, or in anything similar to this, recognize that the minute you admit to that, or you recognize it, it means that you have it. And here's the thing. If you give it, you can take it. We are not stuck with our behavior up until, we always have a choice. We always have a choice. So curious, how did you change your energy exchange with your sons after that realization?
Yeah, I think, as I said, the marriage breakup, I was the active one in it. I was the one who left. And passive aggressive behaviour is such that the people who operate that way appear nice, funny, all that sort of thing. And yet underneath, there's this quite angry person who's taking it out in little subtle ways, often disguised with humour, so that, "Oh, can't you take a joke?" And that, they've just said something quite nasty, and, "Oh, can't you take a joke?" So on the face of it, I was the bad one. I left the marriage, and my ex-husband was very good, and still is, at playing the victim. Oh, poor me. I actually had a friend who knew him and said, "Look, he says to people, 'Oh, my wife left me and I don't know why.'" So I know that so that was, in a sense, the images that were being we're being cast. So I was the bad person for leaving the marriage and breaking the marriage up. And that it impacted my younger sons more than my eldest. And so I did a lot. So getting back to your initial question, I did a lot of, I don't think of the word, pacifying, placating their anger. And so, you know, it was a case of I would take their anger and their disappointment and their, you know, whatever frustration, and I would just carry it and wear it, because I understood why they were angry. I understood why they were disappointed. And I could see, oh gosh, talking about this is giving me a real weight on the chest. So this is actually really still something that's hugely meaningful for me, a period in my life. I carried all that weight because I felt I could, because I know I'm strong. And I wanted them to be able to heal, and I wanted them to know, in a sense, that I was a safe place for them, that I loved them regardless of what they did to me. In that sense, not that, again, it's just about their being angry with me, but I wanted them to know that I was a safe place. However, after understanding that by doing that, I was actually giving my power as a human being away to them. I was putting my needs down, privileging theirs. I actually, at one point, blocked my sons on social media. And because I just needed to step away from their energy and not be involved with them. If I didn't block them, I unfollowed them, or just so that I didn't see even the things that they were doing. And that was probably about 6 months that I did that, because I just needed to step away from that energy. And really, thank you so much for asking these questions, because I don't know that I've actually articulated this as a whole before. And so I'm really valuing the opportunity to do this, because it helps me, again, keep putting things in perspective and slotting them into their places in my growth, in my journey. So yeah, it was that sense of stepping away, of protecting myself. And then when I felt as though I was ready to step back and engage with that energy again, I did that under my own terms. And that it brings with it, well, there's disappointment from my perspective, because that is not how I thought my life as a mother was going to turn out, because we have this picture that we'll always, have these lovely relationships with our children, and it doesn't always work out that way. That said, I have sufficiently good relationships with all my sons that we can talk on the phone for half an hour, or we can be in a family gathering and there's no tension. But I don't have the closeness, particularly with the two younger ones, that I would have liked. And I just have to keep coming to terms with that's the reality of my life.
Thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability in sharing. I think so many women that are either in a difficult marriage or relationship, or have actually separated, have years of guilt and shame and all of those things that come with being a mom. Because guys, being a mom, I'm telling you, it's something special, right? We carry so much want, and we can carry so much guilt for what we think we haven't provided for our children. But I think it's important that we talk about the fact that everything, what am I trying to say? There are consequences to every action. And when things don't go our way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has anything to do with us or as a reflection of our worthiness. And I commend you for being able to say, I am disappointed, but I have accepted it. We can be disappointed, right? I have two children, and we can be disappointed in their behavior. We can be disappointed in our behavior, but it doesn't take away our worthiness, or it shouldn't if we've learned to do that. Did you have support to navigate this? Because you're articulating it so well, and I'm wondering, oh my God, did she have some help? Did you have therapy? Did you have a coach? Did you have counseling? How did you navigate this?
I think I've had support all the way along. In the initial years, I had a very good friend in the town that I was living in, and she just stood with me. And that was that. And she said, I don't have any answers for you, Bron. And I'd say, I don't need answers. I just need you to be here. And I will always be grateful to her for that. And so probably for the first 3 or 4 years, she was a really good support for me. Once I joined the Salvation Army, I was able, even before that, I'd accessed some counselling. And so I did counselling probably for 5 or 6 years, some of it to do with me personally. And then the Salvation Army has what they call supervision, which is basically going to see a counsellor about what's happening in your church, because you're doing all this interpersonal stuff, and often it brings up your own junk, you know. So I probably did that, probably even maybe 7 or 8 years of semi-regular sessions with a counsellor, like, every month or every couple of months. And that was really good. It was not necessarily always about finding out something huge, but huge things did come out just as we talked through things.
What a great call out. I know that, as a coach, I have, people have an assumption that, and I admit that even I had this assumption, that you have to be really, really, really hurting to ask for help. Mm. And I think it's one of the biggest misunderstandings in my profession is, you know what? You don't have to be that, you don't have to hurt to ask for help. We all need help. It just looks differently. And many of us, myself included, had no idea how much help we actually needed until we started on something surface. And I've said this, I've shared this story before, but when I got certified as a mastery method coach, the first 6 months of the year-long program, we learned all of the techniques and we would practice on each other. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm not that, I don't have that many problems. Can we just get to the business part of this? I don't need to do inner child work. Like, what is that? And of course, within first 30 minutes of doing inner child work with my partner, I was sobbing, and who knew, right? And it brought up all of these things. But as far as being a badass, I want to make sure that our listeners recognize that badasses need help too. And what makes them badass is they're willing to ask for it. Because I believe that when we ask for help, we are telling the universe that we matter. And that it's okay that we don't have the answers, right? It's okay. If I was born with all the answers, I'd be the Messiah. And that's not me. I'm Mahara, right? So thank you for sharing that and letting us know that you did have help along the way. Can we jump forward now to your time with the Salvation Army and became an ordained minister with them? And obviously, you really developed your leadership skills. You said that your biggest learning from that was recognizing the power that you have. What did you do with that power?
Okay. Now, that's interesting. I don't think... Yeah, that's a good question. The recognizing my power actually didn't come until after I left the Salvation Army and completely stepped away from the Christian tradition in which I'd been raised, and I had spent literally 6 decades of my life, because there continues to be the messaging that, despite being an ordained minister, I was still only a woman. And, and you could see it in the hierarchical structure that women generally did not get the same sort of promotion opportunities. But the thing that was significant, the most significant thing for me from my time in the Salvos, actually there was two. One was working with a woman who had schizophrenia while I was in Canberra. And that's probably my biggest, if I can say, what was your biggest achievement with them? It was actually just being with this woman, helping her navigate doctor's appointments, meetings with government departments. She felt unsafe in the rental housing that she had, and she needed to get out and move. And over an 18-month period, I wrote letters, I went to meetings with her, and she got to a safe place. And for me, that was the most significant thing I did, because I helped change someone's life. And I learned a lot in the process. But personally, it was when I was working, as I said, on Nauru, so a Pacific island, very different culture to the Australian culture, working with then asylum seekers and refugees who were from the Middle East, largely. And I was confronted by all this difference. Here's the girl who's grown up in largely white Australia who only speaks English from, this Christian faith background. So all these people who had brown, black skins, who spoke different languages, and a lot of them were Muslim, like totally, totally different to me. I recognised that I had this latent racist bias, not because I wanted to, it wasn't part of my value system, but I'd learned, again, messaging, that people who were different to me were a threat. And also the whole thing around white privilege and white superiority. Being now in a different culture, people whose skin colour was very different to mine, who had different languages. I only speak English, all these other languages. I had a Christian faith background. A lot of the refugees were Muslim. I was confronted with difference on a big scale. And that helped me, my own bodily reactions, feeling afraid, helped me recognise that I had this latent racist bias, largely from growing up in white Australia. That didn't fit with my values of connection and of being inclusive. So, I recognised that I had these values here, but I also had this other way of thinking that I didn't like. And I had to recognise that the two things were true in my life. But I also recognised, as I observed how the white expats, including myself, were responding to the Nauruans, like the whole, I come from a developed country, I've got a university education, therefore, of course, I know better. And when I sat down with Fatima, who headed up the Salvation Army Nauruan team, and said, this is what I've been observing, she said, we know that about you guys, but we just accept it. So here she was reflecting back to me what I had been observing. So, that's the first time I understood about white privilege and white superiority. So those two things, which were things I had to learn about myself. When we talk about power, I believe the more we know ourselves, the more powerful we are. So having to face the dark side of us, and it's not necessarily, big monsters inside, it's just things about us that don't fit with our values, but recognising and owning those things. When we know those things about ourselves, we then get a choice. What am I going to do? Am I going to continue to allow those unconscious ways of doing things to impact my relationships and my decisions, or can I change that? Can I be aware that I've got these ways of thinking, but not allow them to impact me? So that's, in a sense, is where your power comes from too, is recognising what's in you and who you are, and then deciding, well, if you don't like what it is, what are you going to do about it?
Here, hands up, giving you a high five. One of the hardest things that I've learned on my journey so far is recognizing that just because I feel something doesn't make it true. And that was a big one for me. And also that I actually do have a choice in every single thing I do, think, act, say. And that's part of being a badass. It's not about being a bitch or being the loudest or the meanest or the most aggressive. It's about, to your point, I think, recognizing our power. And our power lies in being authentic and vulnerable and questioning, wow, why do I feel that way when I see the homeless man across the street? Why does my heart race? Why am I saying that in my head? Of course, I'm just picking things out of the air here, but part of being human is figuring out why we're feeling the way we're feeling. And truthfully,
Yes.
a lot of us there's a reason why we feel this way, because we had lousy things happen to us, but it doesn't make us lousy. Right. And I that's what I'm hearing from your story is, even, you know, as this grown-up woman in this church, having these epiphanies later on in life. And I'm right with you, because of course my epiphanies have come fairly recently as well. But it is a great thing to have, and it's okay. It makes you human, right? It's what you do with it that matters.
Yes, absolutely.
Matters. Okay, so what got you to jump from the Salvation Army to public speaking?
There were a couple of things. One was, this is something I'd always wanted to do, even before I joined the Salvation Army. But also, I knew that, like, the Salvation Army really looks after its long-serving officers. But because I joined midlife, I wasn't going to qualify for that support when I retired. So I knew I was going to have to make it on my own at some stage. So let's do it at 60 rather than at 67. That was one of the deciding factors. And really, it was just, again, you know, finances came together. I started out house sitting, so I knew, you know, I had some safe places to go. So it really was just, in a sense, getting all the ducks in a row and going, now I will start this. Had no idea how I was going to do it, but that didn't matter. Sometimes you just got to start.
So what is it about public speaking that fills your cup?
Oh, I like that, because I am one of the, like, I think 1% of people in the world for whom public speaking is a joy rather than absolute terror. What is it that fills my cup? It is my happy place. It doesn't mean that I don't expend energy. I do expend energy, and often I feel quite tired after it, because you're literally sharing of yourself. Even with the most well-constructed presentation, most of it is you. You know, you are sharing out of your heart. You know, you're not winging it, but you are sharing out of your heart, out of things that are important to you. And I think it's because there has always been stuff in my heart that I want to share. Plus, I have the gift of the gab. So I have this ability to speak and to be articulate, and being in front of people does not scare me at all, and really hasn't for a long time, not since sort of teenage years, really. So I think that's just, I've got a natural ability in that area. And I think this is what attracted me to teaching too. I'm a natural teacher. I want to impart things. I know I have wisdom. I know I've learned lots of stuff. I don't want other people, particularly other women, having to do the journey that I've done if they could, you know, jump a few steps. You know, if I could share some stuff with them so that they can have that epiphany in their 40s or in their 30s rather than in their 50s and 60s. So that, you know, it's, I just want to be able to help people understand themselves better, because that is the most exciting journey of our lives.
Oh, amen to that. So, do you call yourself a motivational speaker, or do you speak on specific topics as a public speaker?
Yeah, look, I suppose loosely, I'm a motivational speaker. My two main areas that I speak about or speak on are unconscious bias and women and their power. And the two actually meld together often.
Nice. So would you say, now that you are looking back on your life, would you say that this has been your secret power, your superpower all along, and it just took you 50 odd years to find it?
It's again, that's a good question. One thing that I've recognised over time is that I have a really well-developed injustice radar. And I've often wondered, and I'll probably need to give this some more thought, the fact that I see women, and I saw women even before I was cognitively able to start joining the dots, I saw capable women not being used to the best of their ability. That whether that that was tugging at that injustice that is so strong in me, you know, and so I think that's the motivator, and I saw that around me with women, and I continue to see that around me with women, you know, and you know, women of all colours, races. Like, this is a global issue. This is not a Western culture issue. This is a global issue. You know, patriarchy is a global system. So I think it's the injustice is at the heart of it. So it's fighting the injustice that I see that half of the population suffers under.
Well, I want to say thank you for that, because not all of us choose to act on what we see, right? Not all of us do that. And I want to call out that it takes a lot of guts to do what you're doing. And I want to thank you for that, because every time we talk, is why I do the podcast. Every time we have a conversation and people hear it, it's an opportunity to affect change. And if we want the world to be a better place, then we have to do our part. Not saying that everybody needs to get up on a podium and beat the stick and beat the drum, but if you have a calling, and I'm speaking to you guys, listeners, if you have a calling in your heart to step a little bit outside of your comfort zone, to make a difference in the world, do it. It makes you badass. And it's what you're here for, right? We're not here just to grow up and have kids and experience challenges. We're here to make a difference in our world, and we are one community, right? It's so evident now. Look, I'm in Alberta, Canada, you're in Melbourne, and we are chit-chatting like you're next door. So the world is a small place. And just as a challenge to all of the listeners, if there's that little thing that you've been thinking about, wouldn't it be nice if? I'm challenging you to take one step towards that, because that's what we are here for. We're here to make a difference in the world. Bron, what's coming up for you as far as your public speaking or anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, thank you. I'm doing quite a few workshops at the moment. So I've got hopefully some workshops in Kuala Lumpur, which will be wonderful. That'll be an opportunity to go to Asia, which I've not done before. And also, you know, doing some professional development work with an educational institution here in Melbourne. So, I'm loving the diversity of opportunities that I'm getting at the moment.
Sounds amazing. Well, I can't thank you enough for sitting down and chatting with me today. I've loved our conversation, and I'm excited to see what the rest of the year brings for you. So please do keep in touch. Listeners, check the show notes. Anything that I can put in, everything that I can put in there, I'm going to put in there, because I would love you to know more about this amazing woman and all of the work that she's doing to make the world a better place. My name is Mahara. This has been the Art of Badassery, and I will see you next week. Thanks again. Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Badassery. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained valuable insights to help unleash your inner badass. If you found this podcast helpful, please leave a rating or review on your favorite platform. Your feedback not only helps me improve the show, but it also helps others like yourself discover the podcast. Until next time, keep embracing your authenticity and living life on your terms. Here's to you.